Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, this is BestInSlot, and tonight we're going to cover all the information we have on E750, and then theorise and speculate as to what exactly this mystery is. Warning now, there will be spoilers for Camp Cretaceous Season 2 and Camp Cretaceous Season 1 in this video. I wouldn't say they're major ones for Season 2, and I will make sure to not give you any information which I don't think is totally relevant to what's going on. Let's get started. So, first things first, what do I even mean by E750? What are you on about, you mad British man? What do we know about it? Let's go through that. Going back to Season 1, Episode 2, Sammy is being Sammy about things and she asks Dr. Wu what's down this dark, closed-off hallway. Wu tells her that it's his private office, restricted, but Brooklyn's ears, as they do, perk up. Later on, she sneaks off from the group and heads down the darkened corridor to Wu's private office before bumping into Sammy, who's doing the same thing. Now, Sammy claims she's looking for a bathroom, but of course we know from Season 1 she's a spy for Manticore, so that seems pretty unlikely. Brooklyn sneaks into Wu's restricted office when Wu himself shows up before being pulled away. She explores a little bit and then she finds a PC and an active monitor. Now, whilst we can't read the text, she says E750 clinical trial results out loud before discovering a classified folder. Unfortunately, the security system shuts her down when she tries to open it, they're kicked out of the lab and the matter is put to rest. Until Eddie arrives. Eddie pops up later in Season 1 and Eddie is a little bit nuts and he's having a bad birthday. He prattles on for a bit about how they're all doomed and abandoned before Kenji brings up Dr. Wu. Eddie dislikes Dr. Wu. He says he's to blame for all of this, which of course he is because of the Indominus Rex, partially at least, but he continues on saying that Masrani, Deering, they're all clueless about what's really going on here. Now this can't be the Indominus Rex because Masrani and Deering were both well aware of the I-Rex. So whatever Eddie is talking about is probably in reference to E750, and this link does get a little bit stronger later on in Season 2 as well. There's a little bit of a kerfuffle, Eddie runs out and steals the van, I-Rex pops up, not really being about that life, and we say goodbye to Eddie. Eddie is very dead. So that was Season 1, that's all the information we had in Season 1. Let's move on to Season 2, and as I say, I will try to keep this light on extraneous spoilers. 3 episodes in, the girls are exploring the genetics lab, the same one with Wu's private office from earlier on. Brooklyn stumbles upon a photo of Eddie and Wu together, calling him the van-stealing birthday weirdo, which seems harsh, I mean he's super dead. She then makes the connection to Eddie's link to the other guys, as he said, and deduces that Eddie was likely working for Manticore, possibly trying to remain close to Wu in order to steal details for Manta, and if that was his goal, it makes sense he would also know about Wu's secret projects, including E750. Behind the photo she finds a manila envelope marked E750, some stuff goes down, I said I'd avoid spoilers, and eventually they end up outside opening said envelope. Inside is a keycard, but also a series of white squares, labelled with numbers at the top, 1309 and 1310, as well as a prominent 4-letter code, and then a series of smaller codes containing the same 4 letters rearranged. There's a third square, but it's obscured and we never get to see the information. Now we're going to hold here for just a second, because these squares seem important. The 4 letters visible are TCGA, and those of you who remember your high school biology will know that TCGA are the 4 nucleotide bases of a DNA strand: thymine, cytosine, guanine, and adenine. Essentially, the formation of these 4 numbers defines your genetic makeup. It's the code that tells your cells what to do. These sequences would typically be much longer than this, but Camp Cretaceous is likely just getting the point across. These panels are the genetic makeup of a creature. So I've got 2 ideas about what we are probably looking at here. The first and the less likely is that these represent the several different creatures that go into E750, and it therefore assumes that E750 is a hybrid dinosaur, something we'll come back to. So the first tab would be, say, a Tyrannosaurus Rex, the second a velociraptor, and the third we can't see something else. The folder then contains the information about what parts, what dinosaur constituents are needed to build E750, and that would be something Manta would be very curious about. The main reason this seems unlikely to me is that the numbers at the top are sequential. It's 1309, then it's 1310, and we assume probably 1311 afterwards. That suggests that there were 1308 attempts before the ones that we see here. Just as we know there are multiple attempts at, say, the Indoraptor, something we'll come back to. I think each of them probably represents a version of E750 and its genetic makeup, hybrid or not, with Eddie assumedly smuggling out the information to Manticore about Wu's latest attempts. We have reason to believe Wu has been somewhat successful, as we'll see in a little bit, so it makes sense for these genetic codes to be the ones that Eddie wants to escape with. Later in the series, Kenji's doing Kenji things, and is jamming on a random button despite having absolutely no idea what it does. He is all of us. The show takes us up through the wires connected to the button and, thanks to Kenji, we see them connecting to a tank, with liquid nitrogen, or what looks like liquid nitrogen, spilling out over the sides. The button mashing overheats the connection to this tank, sparks fly and the wire dies, cutting the power. The camera pans up and we get our first look at what we assume to be E750. It's hard to make too much out, the shape is hazy to say the least, but the back of the creature is clearly spiked, and it does seem to drop into a tail towards the bottom of the tank. As I say, the power dies, the lights dim, and then clear cracking noises are heard, as though something frozen is being disturbed. Inadvertently, Kenji seems to have woken up E750 from its cryogenic slumber. It's very dramatic. Soon afterwards, Brooklyn is operating a camera and comes across a door labelled E750. Unfortunately, she can't investigate because of dumb things like the plot, but at the very end of the episode, compies nibble on the wires, the pesky little buggers that they are, and they shut down the power to the lab completely. We zoom in again on E750 as the door floods with escaping gas, an alarm blares, and just before the camera cuts out we hear a screech, which to me sounds both animalistic and robotic in nature. And that's everything we know about E750. For me, this is actually the most compelling plotline that Camp Cretaceous has going for it, and my main interest in Season 3 is finding out exactly what is in that tank, much more than anything else. I don't care if the kids get off the island, what's in the tank? But what do we think it is? There's a few theories floating about, 3 main ones that I can recall, let's go through them now. The first, and definitely the most outlandish, is that it's a Siberian mammoth. One of the reasons people believe this is we actually see a Siberian mammoth skeleton being transported early on in Season 1, and Wu mentions at the time that this is a Siberian mammoth. The second reason is that, as we saw, the creature is being cryogenically frozen, and mammoths like being frozen, probably. You know, if you pulled a mammoth out from the ice, and you wanted to maintain that until you were ready to release it, you'd freeze it. Finally, InGen does actually have a facility in Siberia itself, as confirmed by a news article posted on masraniglobal.com quite a long time ago. This so-called Martel facility is there specifically to dig for woolly mammoth remains, with the hopes of expanding InGen's genomic library. It seems that, subtly at least, Jurassic World is prepping us for the introduction of woolly mammoths and perhaps other Pleistocene creatures. That would be a whole other video, but it is interesting. The creature in the vat though, with the thick tail and that spiny back, and though hazy, I think the body does look theropod-esque. I think that's unlikely to be a mammoth. I also don't think a mammoth would fit in with the world that Camp Cretaceous has established that well without heading to the mainland, to Siberia for example, where you could introduce a mammoth into the franchise. That would be great. I think on Isla Nublar, I just don't see it working. So for now we'll have to put that one on ice. Oh yeah. The second and the most common theory floating about is that it's a new type of hybrid dinosaur, which seems pretty obvious. Something that's going to escape and terrorise the campers during Season 3, since they do like to introduce new dinosaur antagonists. Eddie did mention that people have no idea what kind of stuff goes on here, which is, by the by, another strike against the mammoth, because that is public knowledge, as I showed. And he mentioned that Wu is interested in creating monsters, not dinosaurs. The smoking gun though is the monitor that Brooklyn looks at all the way back in Season 1 Episode 2. As she's reading the monitor, she says E750 clinical trial results, so we know she's reading about the creature. And on the screen there are 4 different images. There's a Carnotaurus, a Spinosaurus, a Velociraptor, and the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Now 3 of those dinosaurs contributed to the Indominus Rex, but the Spinosaurus was excluded. Could Wu be combining these 4 in the hopes of creating a new, even larger hybrid? Imagine an Indominus Rex with the genes of a Spinosaurus in there. One with aquatic capabilities and the increased ferocity of that movie monster Spinosaurus from Jurassic Park 3. After all, according to the new canon, Masrani was the one, or Masrani global, were the ones who created the Spinosaurus. As far as I'm concerned, the less said about that the bloody better, but we'll move on. I do have a couple of problems with that specific theory though. The first is that the creature in the tank has no signs of a sail, which would seem a little odd to me for a Spinosaurus hybrid. A number of people have suggested that the Spinoraptor from Jurassic World Evolution, which is a really cool hybrid, could make an appearance here, but the body with the spikes and the lack of sail, it doesn't look like a Spinoraptor. The spikes alone should rule that out. The second though is interesting, it's because if this is a brand new hybrid, what does that say for the Jurassic World canon? Camp Cretaceous is, by all intents of the creators, a canonical piece of Jurassic World. Its story is part of the wider story of the films and the novels, etc. Colin Trevorrow himself has said that Camp Cretaceous Season 3 is going to have links with Jurassic World Dominion. If there's a third, as of yet undiscovered hybrid about to be unleashed on Isla Nublar, would that not be a topic of discussion in Fallen Kingdom? Would Wu have not made a reference to it by now? All of the theories carry that same approximate problem, of course. Camp Cretaceous Season 3 has to take place before Fallen Kingdom, so whatever E750 is, it has to be either killed or removed before the events of that film, you would think realistically. Perhaps Manticore could come in during Season 3 and take it for themselves, thus setting up events in Dominion, but my problem with that is that Trevorrow said we're not getting hybrid dinosaurs in Dominion. So you see how we can kind of go around in circles a little bit here. My personal theory though is that E750 is a variety of Indoraptor. Now we know that Wu developed the Indoraptor in the basement of Lockwood Manor, but there's no reason he couldn't have already been developing it during the events of Jurassic World, especially because we know he'd already been communicating with Hoskins about developing dinosaurs for combat purposes. We also know that the Indoraptor we see in Fallen Kingdom was just a prototype, meaning there absolutely could have been earlier prototypes that didn't work out, they looked silly, they were killed at an early age, or were instead left behind in cryogenic chambers. Interestingly enough, there was originally going to be a white Indoraptor as well in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Could that be what we're going to get? That would be pretty cool, just saying. An earlier Indoraptor prototype would fold much nicer into the canon, rather than trying to explain a brand new hybrid. Children watching Camp Cretaceous would be familiar with the creature-ish, and they'd be able to re-release it as a toy with only small modifications for the E750 variant. It's a surefire moneymaker, really. And finally, it looks like an Indoraptor. The size is about right, the spikes on the back are reminiscent of the quills that sprout up along the back of the Indoraptor. They're thin and they jut out almost randomly, chaotically. And even though there's more of them and they're a little bit thicker, I would say, that would suit the aggressive, bestial vibe that I think an earlier prototype of Indoraptor would probably have. It would also suit Camp Cretaceous, which does try to have a little bit of a horror element in it, despite being a children's show. For me, that is the most compelling theory so far, and I'd actually be pretty excited to see that. I think that could be pretty cool. As much as I may dislike Fallen Kingdom, I think the Indoraptor itself is really well designed. We'll probably have to wait 4 to 5 months to find out though. Actually, Toy Lines will probably spoil it ahead of time, so keep an eye out for that. I'll bring you any new information as soon as we get it. I would still love to hear your own theories down below. Do you think it's any of these three, or do you have something entirely different in mind? This is basically all the information out there. This is all the info we have, so use it to speculate and go a little nuts. Why not? Now, if you enjoyed this video, which took a surprisingly long time to put together, then please do throw me a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for much more dinosaur stuff, as well as more upcoming Camp Cretaceous content. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you lovely folks next time. Cheers, much love as always. Bye-bye.